Right. My name is Gitte Christensen, and I am the Managing Director of Dyalog. And as such, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to APL Seeds 22. This is our attempt to introduce APL to newcomers, and I'll start by introducing you to APL and its environment. So what is APL? Well, it's an executable notation. It's something that Ken Iverson invented to be able to teach about IT or data processing, as it was called back then. And it enabled people with good ideas to bring these ideas to the computer. So that's all well and good, but what does it mean? Well, underneath is the expression that brought me to APL. I had been studying Fortran and COBOL and the relational model and all sorts of stuff in a retraining from biology to EDP, as IT was called back then. And while I was a pretty good hack at Fortran, I could get it to calculate all sorts of things, but I always had a problem when I had to print out the result of the calculation, because not only did you have to declare what type the result would be, you would also have to guess at the width of it, or it wouldn't tell you anything. So when I saw this one, no loops, 1, 2, 3 plus 4, 5, 6, neatly adds up the numbers 1 to 1 and gives you the result. So no loops, no declarations, and as a miracle, it simply prints out the result and tells you what it has calculated. So I was sold with APL. Dyalog Limited is the company that makes APL today. I think we are almost the only commercial operation now that produces APL, in the sense that we've not just taken it over from somebody else. What we do is, it's sort of a one-trick pony. We do APL and that's it. We have a Dyalog interpreter, the one that looks at what you write on the computer and tells the computer what to do. And then there's an integrated development platform with the APL. As a company, we are dedicated to the evolution and the promotion of APL. And since we believe in what we're doing and think that APL is one of God's gift to mankind, we obviously believe that it should be known by a much wider audience that knows of it today. So this is what it looks like. Well, in the olden days, you had a terminal writer, and then later a screen where you could type in your code and your expressions. And then you had a keyboard with engraved symbols on it, because in APL, all the functions, or in other languages, what you call operators, are signified by symbols. And those symbols you need to be able to type in. And so these days we have at the top of the screen what we call a language bar, where you can find all the functions and operators. And if you so insist, we also actually make these engraved keyboards that you can buy from us. But this is what it looks like. And here you can type your programs and you can run them and you can debug them interactively. You can inspect the data and you can see where the function stopped when you made an error, or you can make it stop by yourself. That's all in this screen. But obviously, these days, that's rarely enough. You do need to access the environment and do other things than just write code. So APL comes with a lot of built-in tools that allows you to do that. We have, for instance, a paradigm for functional programming, what we call defons. We also allow the object-oriented paradigm It's not something we recommend that you use when you design applications in APL, but it's very good when you have to talk to the outside world where lots of stuff and tools are object-oriented methods, and you need to be able to talk to them in a way they understand. We interface to .NET, which is also object-oriented. You need to get data in and out of your workspace where you can process them. So we have various functions to, for instance, import comma-separated variables or data in XML format or JSON format. We have date-timed functions. We have regular expressions, built-in graphics, plots. We have a very good interface to Win32, where we have tools to create graphical user interfaces. But obviously these days, that's not so modern anymore. And we are working hard to give you almost the same capabilities with HTML-based user interfaces. There's an interface to SQL, ODBC. That's a very old one, but it still seems like the one a lot of people prefer to work with. And there's TCP/IP to talk between different applications and even sometimes internally in your own applications. And we have parallel computing where you can actually split your processing into several isolates that run in parallel on the different processors on your laptop or on bigger server farms. Right, so this is actually where we spend most of our time keeping APL up to date in terms of interfaces to the environment. APL is more than 55 years old, and even if we do renew it, the major work for us is to keep it in touch with the development in the IT environment. So one new thing we've done with version 18.2 that came out just last week is that we've had a non-commercial license for quite some years, which allowed people to experiment and play with APL. It's now replaced with what we call a basic license. And the basic license is a free license where you can use a complete copy of the Dyalog technology for personal and non-commercial use and for experiments. And it's a full copy. It's not reduced in any way. It's exactly the same thing you get when you pay for a developer license. We do that because actually the people who pay us the least are the one who needs all the interfaces and all the facilities the most. So cutting some stuff up would not make sense for us to show you what APL can do and what it's like to work with it. Now, in the past, you could not distribute your APL or Dyalog APL with your work. So it meant that you could only distribute your code, and then the recipient would need to have a Dyalog installation of its own. In these modern times with Docker containers and all that, this turned out to be a little bit cumbersome because actually you do get the APL with the Docker container, and then you can just insert your code and then give it to somebody else. So what we've done as a new thing is we have included the runtime with the basic license. And that means that you can use it for fun, you can submit your entries to competitions, and you can share it with friends as long as you don't make money. If you do make money, and you make money above £5,000 a year, there's a 2% fee due to Dyalog. And actually, we think it's fair. You can use it as much as you want, but if you start making money, we would like a small contribution from you to cover the work we're doing. Obviously, if you make a great success of it and becomes profitable, there's a lot of alternative ways you can have a license, and we can talk about that when you get to that point in time. So the ways you can distribute your APL application, you can either make an executable application, sort of a standalone executable, or you can make what we call a runtime applications, which sort of embeds your code but doesn't allow the user to get into development mode. That is possible in the Windows environment, but you can also create web services with APL, and you can, as I mentioned before, distribute it in Docker containers. And there is a number of Docker containers pre-made by us that serves different purposes, and you can explore them at the address here. The slides will be available to you after the session. So what I also said, that we try to spread the use of APL and tell people about the value of using it. These three guys are doing most of the work in that area currently, and this is Richard Park, it's Rodrigo, and it's Adam Bushevsky. So look for them if you need help or want training, or you can find them at a lot of different social media, and you will meet them later today, all of them. So when we have events like this, we have on our website a calendar where you can find out when things concerning APL is happening. And there's a list here of stuff just from November last year until now. You can see there's quite a lot of stuff going on. And all of these are recorded. So you can find them if you go to, just see, yeah, Dyalog TV. And in particular, this one, if you're looking for the recordings from last year's APL Seeds, you'll find these. So everything we do pretty much is on the Dyalog TV channel, and you can both find our user meeting recordings and a lot of other things. We do webinars regularly, and you will find them at Dyalog TV as well. So there's a lot of inspiration to get. So who uses APL? Well, mostly it's people who have deep knowledge into areas that is not exactly IT, but they might be actuaries, or they could be oil engineers, or they could be nurses. So they need a tool that allows them to explain the problem and the solution to the computer, but not exactly knowing how to tell the computer how to deal with the problem, which is customary in other languages. And it's people who solve problems and manipulate data in complex environments or where the conditions are constantly changing. And so we see a lot of usage in production, management, business intelligence, finance, medicine, science, computer science, to model stuff, and simulations. And in terms of companies or users, we can't mention all the names of the customers because some of them considers it too much of a competitive advantage to use APL that they don't want us to mention it. But SimCorp, for instance, both the Danish and the Italian subsidiary, who are shareholders of Dyalog, obviously allows us to tell you that they're using it. And they're in asset management, sort of where they keep track of portfolios of stocks and bonds and all that. And obviously new instruments finds its way into the portfolios all the time. So you have to deal with those. And new tax regulations and know your customer rules and all sorts of things happens all the time. So they have to quickly adapt to new rules and new products. Tegra 118 is also an asset management company that uses Dyalog. Within business intelligence, there's KCI Corporation a Los Angeles company that works with planning and reporting for larger corporations. Carlyle Group that works on managing portfolios of loans and matching the payments to the loans when these are sold in bunches between large financial institutions. They need to keep track of what's going on. And IBM Cognos Planning is also an APL-based product, which has a long history of coming from IBM and going around between various companies until it ended up where it came from. But that's a really smart budgeting and planning application that allow you to model the financial flows to a company. There's just-in-time production planning from a large automotive company, propeller design, refinery optimizations in the energy industry, product design, medical records. One of the largest medical record application in the world is running in Stockholm's Lane with more than 40,000 users, 25,000 of them concurrent, and more than 250,000 lookups every day with sub-second response time. The users dearly love this system, which is something that can't be said about many medical record systems, but it's really based on a nurse who understood the problems involved and kept it simple all the way. And then, of course, there's the Stormwind from Finland, Thomas Gustafsson, who's done a real gaming application using APL. And that's one of the only cases where I would say a tight loop is adequate in APL. So with that introduction, I'll hand you over to Richard and hope that you enjoy this event and get some new inspiration.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Gitte. I'm just going to make myself visible.
You are visible.
Yes, but even more so now.
Good.
All right. So yeah, thank you very much. As Gitte said, I'm involved. My name's Richard Park. I'm involved in a lot of the outreach, evangelism, and stuff related to training with APL with Dyalog. And I just want to start by saying thank you very much, everyone who registered and everyone who's attending now. I can see from the registration statistics that the majority of you seem to be new to APL. So that's perfect for us, because that's exactly who we're looking for today. I hope that you find today's event interesting and it can inspire you to, if you've never used APL before, perhaps give it a go, or perhaps you'll find what you're looking for in terms of growing your APL knowledge and improving and learning how to do things the APL way. All right, so yeah, so learning APL, we're working on a lot of things for helping people get started, although it is a language with a long history. As people come to the language for the first time these days, it's obviously important for there to be some good materials available to help people get started with modern APL in modern environments, and the way things work these days. So yeah, if you enjoy today and decide that you want to try APL, or you've tried some APL, perhaps an online interpreter I'll mention in a bit, but you want to get started with the actual Dyalog interpreter, we have this page on our website for getting started. Looks a bit like this. There are a lot of useful links. Some of them I'll mention explicitly just now. But in particular, one I want to highlight is this tips page. Relatively recently added, but it's basically from users and ourselves. A lot of the things that we think are especially useful, but not exactly obvious when you first get started with the actual interpreter. So yeah, feel free to give that a look when you get started. Sorry. It's not just us producing learning materials and videos and stuff. There are lots of people out in the wider APL community who are also producing excellent things. So for example, this is an unofficial Dyalog APL vocabulary in the style of the J Nuvoc, I think. And it groups together the symbols and other glyph constructs quite neatly. It's quite visually pleasing, and also gives some names that might be more familiar to people outside of the APL community, rather than the technical nomenclature that's used in our documentation. That's just one example. There are lots more things, and a lot of those can be found on the APL wiki, which I'll never miss an opportunity to plug. If you are getting started, or you already have started, this is an excellent place to go and find learning resources at different levels to help you learn and practice APL. It's a large project because it'll be hard to see in the corner, but it's quite a thick book. Actually, you won't be able to see that at all. But Rodrigo is continuing to rework and update the Mastering Dyalog APL book, which was originally published, was that 2009? That's being updated with new constructs that we've added in Dyalog APL, and also being produced as a Jupyter ebook. It's a bit easier to navigate via a web browser. I suspect many of you have heard of and used this already, but just in case, I thought I'd stick Try APL on here. If you want to give APL a go, want to try any of the things or some of the things you see today, but you don't want to commit to installing the entire system, you can try APL online at tryapl.org. As Gitte already mentioned, Dyalog TV is where you can go after this event. Can't promise exactly when. Find recordings of these sessions. Also, last year's recordings, our regular user meetings, and webinars that we host. And I thought I would also mention some of the new things coming up. So Stefan Kruger, who will be speaking later today, has produced this excellent guide to learning APL. It's been really well received. It's an excellent resource for people, I suppose, who've already got a bit of experience in programming and want to see what, a nice introduction to modern APL. I've got a couple of questions that I can see. Might as well address. Micro APL keyword version. Interesting point. I'll come back to that. And Adam is answering, does Dyalog plan on creating a notebook interface for APL? And in fact, we already do have a Jupyter notebook interface. Yes, this is a bit of a link dump. I'll show you at the end places where you can go and find some higher level links that link to all of these places, and I'll probably just paste all of them in the chat anyway. Sorry, thanks for that. So yeah, Stefan Kruger's excellent book if you're getting started with APL but you've done some programming already. There's also in the works a revamp of the APL tutor at tutorial.dyalog.com. So this is a system that's existed for a long time, and people who use it tend to really like the content. It's a great introduction, even if you've never done programming before. You're starting from scratch with APL. But the interface itself is a little bit clunky, so that's actually being reworked at the minute by Andrew Sengel, who will also be speaking later today. So it's going to be a bit cleaner, a bit more pleasant to look at, and a bit easier to use. And I'm currently working on a sort of self-study course with examples. It's been a kind of introductory state for a while, written some more material for it, which has then been through the mill, used with some people, and taking the feedback from that and working on integrating that into the main site. So those are things to look out for this year. So yeah, there are lots of good resources and more being created these days where you can study APL for yourself. But of course, at some point, you're probably going to hit a block of some kind or something where you'll want to ask a real person. Although one of the touted benefits of APL, or a double-edged sword, is you might not necessarily want to or be able to go straight to Google, how do I do XYZ in APL? We're not averse to Stack Overflow. In fact, we really encourage you to ask questions there. They tend to get answered quite quickly by people in the community who are always more than happy to help. More places where you can meet the APL and array language community at large include the APL Farm Discord server. So there is a link here, but again, at the end, there's links to the links. And this is not just APL, but other array languages have channels on there as well. So there's an APL channel, a K channel, BQN, New Kid on the Block, a Nile channel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and one for J as well. The APL JK subreddit actually continues to be relatively lively. I think the most recent post is probably still Rodrigo's blog post from yesterday about solving Wordle with APL, and my slightly snarky comment, but we talked about it this morning. He's all friendly, don't worry. apl.chat is a short URL that you can use to access the APL Orchard chat room. So this is a chat room that's live and active every day. People go there to ask for help with APL all the time. You'll probably get the impression today, I hope you do, that, well, with APL, there's often more than one way to tackle a given problem. And that's not really any more exemplified than with the new APL weekly quest, which is basically people in the orchard going through previous phase 1 problems from the APL problem solving competition. So there's one a week, and even though they're really simple problems, it's a great opportunity to look at tackling them in different ways, often for different ends, like, best performance or shortest code are the obvious ones, but even just how to best express the idea, or even just to have the silliest solution. They're good ways to learn all the different primitives or new constructs and ways of doing things that you might not have thought of before. So that's every Friday, 3 o'clock standard time, universal time. And speaking of the APL problem solving competition, this year's round has launched. That was a couple of weeks ago. If you're a full-time student, there's an opportunity to win cash prizes. The total prize pool is $6,500, and an expenses paid trip to the Dyalog user meeting, which this year is in Portugal. If you're not a student, so you're a professional entrant, there are still prizes available. Well, there's a prize for a professional entrant to win free registration to the Dyalog user meeting. And even if you don't want to write any code at all, if you tell other people about the contest, they can put you down as the referrer, and if they win, then you can win an equivalent prize. So you can go and start now at contest.dyalog.com, and you have several months to enter. And I think that's where I have to leave it, apart from introducing today's program, because I'm supposed to be talking about now. Firstly, I'll be giving a very basic introduction to APL. So even if you haven't done any before, you'll be able to see a bit of how it works. Afterwards, Stefan Kruger, who I mentioned with the book, will be answering the question, what is a KMA, with some exploration in bioinformatics problems. Then Andrew Sengel will be talking to us about his April APL compiler for Common Lisp, as well as some really exciting looking visual applications of APL. And then also the Arraycast will be having a live recording after that, where we'll be having a chat about, I guess, stuff from today, getting started with APL, and whatever else comes up.